So welcome to our third service in our series based on Don Miguel Ruiz's book, The Four Agreements. And today we'll focus on the third agreement, don't make assumptions. That sounds like a hard ask, doesn't it, sometimes, not to make assumptions? Don Miguel Ruiz shares the following. We have the tendency to make assumptions about everything. The problem with making assumptions is that we believe they are the truth. If we don't pause and realize that they are an assumption in our mind, they become a reality. We make assumptions, we believe we're right, and we defend them. That was a quote from Ruiz. I just want to say as I begin this service that a lot of what I'm sharing, and I'll be quoting Ruiz throughout this service, are his words, not specifically mine. Mine are shared intermittently through it. So let me go forward with this. So why do we make assumptions? Simply said, making assumptions is our brain's shortcut. It allows us to sort and figure out life. The world is complicated, and we learn from previous experiences. So let's look at 5 reasons why we make assumptions, or people make assumptions. Number 1, a lack of information. We fill in the gaps when we don't have all the information about something. Number 2, past experiences. 3, mental shortcuts, as I said before. 4 is because of our emotions and beliefs. Our belief systems color our vision, and we make assumptions based on that. And finally, and unfortunately, stereotyping. Whether it's about race, ethnicity, education, socioeconomics, political groups, people stereotype. If this is this, that is that. Our brain makes an equation. The world is complicated, and we do learn from past and previous experiences. Assuming helps us to function in society. If this is the way you're supposed to dress when you go to a certain business appointment this week, you could pretty much plan on dressing the same way for that appointment next week. That's unless some new information comes along. Until 2020, we all assumed it was appropriate to shake hands when we greeted people, right? And now we ask people, are you shaking hands? And hopefully, after our last sermon on not to take anything personally, we won't take it personally if they won't shake our hand. So in many aspects of our lives, it's not uncommon that we have conflicts with others about their ideas. Your idea of the world can rub up against someone else's. We all know this, especially with politics, religion, sports. We have the Super Bowl coming up next week, or just watching the news. What's interesting about these conflicts is most of them happen without ever communicating with another person. Isn't that interesting? Ruiz points out that the problem with assumptions is that in our minds they become the truth. And in that false narrative, we may create a lot of suffering, not just for ourselves, but for those around us. In our last service on the second agreement, don't take anything personally, we spoke about situations where we believe someone did something intentionally to us when they didn't intend to do something to hurt us or to be against us. Taking things personally is often an assumption. Ruiz shares that the truth is that people tend to make assumptions and judgments about other people without knowing the full story. So if someone seems grumpy or didn't look at us, we may assume that they are unfriendly or just didn't like us. Ruiz shares that humans have a strong imagination and that we bring most of our interactions back to us. Other people are having their own experience. It's not always about us. Have you ever judged someone by their actions only to find out the reason for their behavior was not what you thought? If so, please raise your hand, because I know I'm one of those people that's certainly done that more than enough. I try my best not to, but. So I wanted to share an example, or a few examples from my life where this has happened. And I wanted to share a story I shared earlier this year or last year. So I was quite sure that my mail carrier didn't like me. Sure, he didn't like me. He would not look at me, and he never smiled. And you know me, I'm like the smiley, wavy kind of person, right? And I took it personally, and I made this assumption about him. And then one day, somehow, he happened to connect. He came to my front door, and somehow we connected, and I thanked him, and I asked him how he was. And he just all of a sudden looked at me, and he started to open up. And he shared with me that his wife had died within the last couple of years. And he was struggling. And it seemed like his life was entirely a struggle. He was in so much pain. My heart just completely broke, and I had no idea what was going on. Now I know his name, and I say hello to him and smile, even if he doesn't feel like smiling. I used to work in a printing company when I was in my 30s. It was called Quality House of Graphics. A couple of you know that company. And I used to pass the owner in the hallway, and of course I'd say hello. And again, he never looked at me, didn't acknowledge me, and didn't answer me. And I was sure he didn't like me either. And I heard from one of my colleagues, and we had a conversation about it, and he said, "Oh, John, he always does that. He's just in his head. He doesn't notice anyone that's walking past him." And then one day, I got that. Maybe a couple of years later, I worked there for 10 years. Somebody said to me that I didn't say hello to them when they passed me in the hallway, that I would not acknowledge other people. It happened to be a time in my life where I was going through a lot, and I was in my head, and I was doing the exact same thing repeatedly to people. I was just not conscious of what was around me. It's interesting. But I was so glad that that person had told me that I did that, because it allowed me to have an awareness now, to be more conscious of what was going on and how I was responding. It allowed me an opportunity to apologize and to be more mindful of myself. Remember, assumptions are not based on facts, and we never really know what's going on in another person, even the people that are closest, the people we love the most. Now, how do we do it differently? How do we go about not making assumptions? Ruiz shares that it comes from having the courage to engage in real questions and conversation. Often, the truth is the thing that we're most afraid of, which is sometimes why we don't ask questions. Let's face it, there are times when we don't want to know what somebody feels because we're afraid that maybe, just maybe they don't feel the same way about us or about something, and we're afraid their answer might hurt us. So we prefer an assumption. We prefer to fill in that blank. Having the courage to have a real conversation is how authentic connections evolve. If we just know where people stand, we can understand how to interact with them better. Part of the courage, though, to have a real conversation is to tell someone else our truth as well. Ruiz uses the example of how when we're in romantic relationships, we may just assume that our partner knows what we want and what we don't want because they know us so well. If they love us, they should be able to read our minds. And how many of us have had that experience, either one way or another, in relationships? Of course. Of course. Unfortunately, it's not true. Expecting others to read our minds or making assumptions that we could read someone else's mind is a recipe for problems. And we all know what could come from that. So this other thought came to me in this talk. Expressing boundaries is essential for society, and it's essential for relationships. Gently and clearly expressing your truth is a profound way to get closer to people and for them to understand you. For example, I have a good friend whom I love dearly, and years ago, she had a quality of when she wanted me to do something, she would try to make me feel guilty, especially if I wasn't doing something she wanted me to do. And I noticed that I would get annoyed. And to me, that's a trigger. Making me feel guilty is like one of those childhood triggers. It doesn't work well. So I said to her, I said, blank, blank, I just want you to know that I love you dearly. But that guilt is very uncomfortable for me, and it triggers me. And instead of it making me feel bad and wanting to connect, it does the opposite. And I just wanted you to be aware of that. And we smiled about it, and we laughed. And then 10 years later, we still laugh about it. And it actually, in some ways, made us closer. And it's a common joke between us. And I think it made us love each other more. So speaking your truth or creating your boundaries doesn't have to be done in a harsh or painful way. It could be honest, and it can be gentle. And it can help our relationships. We make the assumption that Ruiz says, that we make the assumption that everyone sees life the way we do. And we assume that he says that we assume that others think the way we think, feel the way we feel, and judge the way we judge. So as we're exploring how not to make assumptions, here's a few thoughts to have in mind. To have the courage not to assume is seek clarity, ask questions, and confirm what people are experiencing. When you're asking questions and connecting with people, to listen as actively as you can and pay attention to what they're saying. It's funny, sometimes people say something and we hear what we hear in our own head, not even their exact words. But if we could do our best to really hear them, and also to pay attention to their body language and get a sense of their perspective. Another opportunity, and this is hard sometimes, but to empathize with another person's point of view or perspective, even if it's different than yours. To check your own biases. We're all human, and we all have biases, and that's part of us. And to be aware of them ourselves and to try to put them aside is really valuable. And then, if you have an assumption, try to confirm if it's true or not before acting on it. Realize that it is not based on fact. And look for evidence in your life. If we consider these 5 points, they can help. They can help, and they could promote honest communication and understanding. And finally, I also wanted to talk a little bit about expectations and how often they are assumptions as well. I think if we could be flexible about our expectations of what tomorrow will bring, we could have a lot more peace in our lives, right? And I've officiated 34 weddings. It's quite a few, right? And I've found that the brides and their families that had a very specific expectation of what that day was going to be did not enjoy that day as much as the brides and their families that were more flexible about the day to come. The ones that did not have a rigid idea of what was to come, whatever it was, were the ones that enjoyed their day the most. I know I'm going on vacation next week. Most of you know about this. A lot of people say, "Are you excited?" And I am. I'm excited for the adventure, but I don't know what's to come. So I try not to have a dream in my mind of what I'm going to experience, and just do my best to be open to what will come my way. Don Miguel Ruiz calls the perception we bring to our lives and our interactions our dream. He uses that term throughout this book. And by changing our awareness about our perception, we change our life. These 4 agreements are all tools for how to change our perception, and in turn change our actions, and ultimately change our life experience. If we actively choose to not make assumptions, we could have more honest and authentic relationships, whether it be in communities like these, or in our relationships, or with our partners, our family, our friends, our dear friends, our acquaintances, our children. Having the courage to ask questions and to speak your truth, your truth, can change your life. Ruiz shares taking action to not make assumptions over and over will strengthen your will and nurtures the seed and establishes a new foundation, a foundation for a new habit to grow. And after many repetitions, these new agreements will become second nature. So in closing, I'd like to share with you the following sentence from our congregation's mission statement. We believe that love is a common thread among all peoples, and truth is a basic human need. These 4 agreements are tools to invite and support the experience of love in our own lives and truth in how we interact with others. My hope today is that these services have planted seeds in your hearts and minds, and that these will bring more love and positive connection into your lives. May we all be stewards of birthing a better world around us and within us. May it be so.
If you like this video, please like us on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and click on the bell to be notified whenever we post a new video. Thank you.